we've talked about the fact that we have a lot in common with people in the first century. But there also are some significant differences when I read in 1 Corinthians 8 about whether I should eat meat that's offered to idols, that had been sacrificed to idols. That's not something I've been struggling with a lot in the last week or two. You know, that's a very different issue. Now, we have brothers and sisters in other parts of the world who may deal with that issue because they come from cultures where idol worship is prevalent, and they may have to actually deal with that, but many of us don't. So how do we make the transition on issues which are very culturally determined in the letters, and move in those passages, instead of just writing off those passages and saying, well, that has nothing to do with us, how do we hear the Word as the Word to us in those situations?
That's an excellent question, and that's one that doesn't lend itself to a very easy answer, such as the example you gave of eating meat offered to idols. I think one of the keys in doing this is reading the Bible very, very closely through all of those passages, reading and rereading, and trying to discern what the cultural issue is that's unique to that situation, but seeing what some of the theological ideas are that are underlying Paul's response to that situation. One of the things that comes out there is an issue of allegiance, and people still giving their allegiance to pagan deities and so on. And so we can ask ourselves, where does our allegiance lie in terms of where Christ stacks up in terms of the other competing things out there? Another issue that comes up here too is Paul compares sitting down at the table of idols to sitting at the table with demons. And this raises a whole other issue, and that is the issue of spiritual power and spiritual authority and the work of Satan in the world, the way he worked then, and then thinking through, how does he work today? How might he gain a foothold in my life? And what can I do to resist his work in this way? Can I learn from this passage on how to resist the evil one?
So even though on the surface there are obvious differences culturally, you have underlying issues that are still very much with us today. So I think of the issue of the weaker brother or sister. We still have issues today. That's what Paul is concerned about in part in 1 Corinthians 8. We still have issues where we need to ask, how does my freedom as a believer maybe negatively affect somebody else if I'm not being sensitive to them as a younger brother or sister in Christ?
That's precisely right. Yeah, the issue of the stronger and the weaker brother, and the issue of being sensitive. And what drives some of this is 1 Corinthians 13. And Paul talks about the importance of love. And so it brings it back home to the issue of, if I'm a believer, I want to emulate Christ in putting myself down, denying myself, and just thinking in a loving and caring way for my brother. What's good for my brother in a situation like that? So that's an excellent point.